To illustrate the fact that every capital good requires prior saving, let us consider the classic example which the great capital theorist and teacher of von Mises, Eugen von Boehm-Bawerk, develops in his classic work Kapital und Kapitalzins, Capital and Interest. Boehm-Bawerk gives the example of Robinson Crusoe on his island. Daniel Defoe was a very intelligent man. He was not only a novelist, but also an economist, so he knew very well what he was writing about. When Robinson Crusoe is shipwrecked, and little by little he regains consciousness, we can all visualize the scene. He wakes up lying on the beach, shivering with cold, his face washed by the waves, and immediately he sits up and thinks, "Am I dreaming? No, I have survived." He is practically naked because his clothes are all torn, etc. And he stands up, stunned, and begins to explore the island. He realizes he has a chance of surviving. His most urgent need is to drink, and he sees a puddle of water, as it has rained during the night, and with that he quenches his raging thirst. In the example Boehm-Bawerk offers, Crusoe discovers some bushes covered with mouth-watering berries, and he realizes that fruit will relieve his hunger, and he can survive on it. Of course, when Robinson Crusoe has been living on a diet of berries and water for a number of days, he becomes aware, as a human being endowed with an innate capacity for creativity and entrepreneurship, that he is living in a wretched state. He devotes the whole day, from sunrise to sunset, to the effort of searching for berries and picking them by hand. He has no time left for anything else, and in that way, with great difficulty, he manages to alleviate his hunger and survive. Well, the entrepreneurial light bulb goes on for him, and he has a realization. Take note, this is the creative act of an entrepreneur, a human being. He thinks, if I had a wooden stick, 2 meters long, I could reach much higher into these bushes, strike them, and gather 10 or 20 times as many berries. So I could gather the berries I need to live on in 1/10 of the time. The rest of the time would be free, and I could devote it to... And the entrepreneurial light bulb goes on for him. How could I spend that time? I could build a hut or a shelter, because I am living at the mercy of the elements. In fact, I see there are wild animals here. Maybe I could make a bow and some arrows, hunt them, eat meat, and make clothes out of their skin. Notice, these ends are of much greater value to him, but unfortunately he cannot achieve them, because he is devoting all of his time to barely surviving by gathering the corresponding berries by hand. So Robinson Crusoe asks himself, how long would it take me to prepare a wooden stick? And he thinks, which is the entrepreneurial act, that the wooden stick would take him 5 days to prepare. So he begins to conceive the different stages involved in the action period. He must select the tree he believes has the most suitable branch. He must climb onto the branch, and using his own weight, remove it. He must take off other, smaller branches, small leaves, etc. He must shape the branch with his hands, a stone and some shells, until it is finally ready. He estimates he will need 5 days. Notice, 5 days separate him from a future he values much more highly, the chance to devote much less time to getting nourishment and so be able to build his shelter. Those 5 days materialize in the form of a series of intermediate stages he must pass through before his wooden stick is ready. So, the problem is that if he must spend 5 days preparing the wooden stick, what will he eat during those 5 days? And here we must all pay close attention to Boehm-Bawerk's example to fully comprehend the role saving plays. Because at that point, Robinson Crusoe says, "It certainly does not look like anyone is going to rescue me from this island. I had better thrive and improve. So, even if it takes an effort, Even if it is a great sacrifice, even if it requires painful discipline, I have no choice but to save. We have just defined saving as any giving up of immediate consumption. The decision Robinson Crusoe makes is obvious. He decides that for a lengthy period of time, he will not consume all the berries he gathers by hand, and instead he will save a portion of them each day in a little basket, though he experiences some hunger. In other words, he decides to save. He decides to tighten his belt until he has accumulated in his little basket enough berries to survive on, without having to make the effort to pick any by hand for 5 days, which is the time period he imagines he will need to prepare his wooden stick. Well, the materialization of each of those intermediate stages is a capital good. As Crusoe saves, he gradually produces his initial capital good, which will culminate in the basket full of berries. Then, once he has enough, and he stops picking berries by hand, and for 5 days devotes himself to finding the branch and preparing the wooden stick, one capital good, the berries accumulated in the little basket, will gradually turn into another different capital good, the wooden stick. And if Crusoe has entrepreneurial success, if he has been right about the project, if he has not made a mistake regarding the time period or the choice of tree, etc., then after 5 days he will have his wooden stick. What has he eaten during those 5 days? He has relied on prior saving, which consisted of making a sacrifice and not eating everything he picked each day. So, what is the difference between the poor Robinson Crusoe, who picks his berries by hand, and the rich Robinson Crusoe, who has a wooden stick? What is the difference? Well, precisely the 5 days of prior saving, which have taken the form of the wooden stick. They have been transformed into that capital good, that tool. Once the process of producing the wooden stick has concluded, the situation is radically different. By striking the bushes, Crusoe can go much further. He can gather 10 times as many berries as before. Just 1 hour's labor is enough to feed him, and he can spend the rest of his time building his shelter. Notice how much Robinson Crusoe's standard of living has risen because he has sacrificed immediate consumption. He has saved, and he has produced a capital good. Any improvement in our living standard requires a prior sacrifice. It requires us to refrain from consuming the maximum possible amount in the short term. The difference between the poor Robinson Crusoe and the rich one is that the rich one has 5 days accumulated in the form of a wooden stick, a capital good. He is rich because this tool permits him to achieve much more. The poor Robinson Crusoe, who did not wish to make a sacrifice and did not wish to save, goes on picking berries by hand. Imagine there had been 2 Robinson Crusoes on the island, and one of them had chosen not to make a sacrifice. Me? Go hungry? No way! But the other had been willing. After a period of time, we would have seen that one was richer than the other. Maybe the first one would have been envious. Hey, why do you have a hut? And why do you have goods? And why do you eat meat while I am poor? It is the old story of the ant and the grasshopper. Listen, I have made the sacrifice of saving and producing a capital good, which has permitted me to achieve much more valuable ends. Meanwhile, you are in a fix because you have not been willing to make that prior sacrifice. The stick, which is the capital good, is simply an intermediate stage in a production process. This stage is more distant in time. Specifically, in Baverk's example, it is 5 days further away, with respect to the immediate berry production process of picking them by hand.